For 6 hours yesterday, an enthusiastic band of volunteers under the energetic leadership of Diane Pierce welcomed a small but steady stream of visitors to First Unitarian Universalist Church as part of Doors Open Winnipeg, an annual celebration of the stories that our city's buildings and even a few of its open spaces have to tell. Judging from past year's People's Choice Awards, the most popular venues are Vaughan Street Jail, Dalnavert Museum, the Legislative Building, the Millennium Center, and outdoor tours that promise ghosts. A couple of churches have made the list: Holy Eucharist Ukrainian Catholic Church and St. James Anglican Church, a historic log church along the Assiniboine River. But most people's tastes lean toward secular buildings offering grand architecture or gruesome stories. 55 buildings opened their doors this year, including a dozen churches and temples, along with 14 open-air venues. We welcomed 108 people to our congregation's home yesterday, and that was enough to keep the volunteers busy offering hospitality, tours, and responding to a refreshing, genuine array of questions about our history and our values as a religious community. Doors Open Winnipeg provides a safe day and a comfortable way to visit congregations without the risk of being overwhelmed by zealous proselytizers intent on winning you over to their particular brand of religious community. By contrast, Sunday mornings are dangerous. Dangerous for visitors, unless you're visiting a synagogue, a mosque, or a Seventh-day Adventist congregation, in which case the risky day and time may vary. Doors Open offers a day each year when visitors can show up on their terms rather than those of their hosts and explore the inner sanctum of whatever church may be on their list. Our volunteers proudly showed our building, drawing attention to its architecture and the stained glass windows, sharing the history and values of our community, and responding thoughtfully to our guests' questions. I enjoyed a few surprisingly deep conversations with a few individuals who were genuinely curious about our approach to religion. And I wouldn't be the least bit surprised to see 2 or 3 of them join us some Sunday morning when they will already feel a little safer, which would be lovely, though not the objective of our participating in this event. I like to think that we now have 108 neighbors who know us a little better and are likely more positively disposed towards our being here. If we open our doors again next year, though, I'm going to suggest ghosts. Lots of them. A plethora of ghosts. A murder of ghosts, if that's what they're called. That's what we call crows. Ghosts appear to be a real draw for Doors Open, and we can do ghosts as well as anyone, even though most of us probably don't believe in them. We can use our imaginations. We could share some of the old ghost stories that the Icelandic founders of this congregation brought with them from home. Some of them are good, some of them are gruesome, all of them are entertaining. Or we could talk about the seances that were held in the old All Souls Church with Horace Westwood's daughter Florence doing the channeling. Or a few other gems I've heard from our history. Ghosts, I tell you. We will pack the people in with ghost stories, and we will win People's Choice the next time around. This year, though, our featured attraction was Heather Emberley's engaging exhibition, Found in Books, which surrounds you this morning. It displays some of the ephemera that has been found in books destined for the Children's Hospital Book Market. I can't say I approve, but the book market is fastidious about removing stray items from books before they go on sale, as well as removing extraneous marks from the pages of the books themselves. They only sell clean copies of books, which are prized by those who fill their personal libraries with used volumes. Personally, I prefer dirty books. Well, not dirty books like priggish parents in Florida mean dirty, but books that haven't been cleansed of the previous owner's notes and memorabilia. I like used books with a history. Books with a story to tell beyond the stories the author intended to communicate. Books that show evidence of the reader's relationship with the text. So while I mark my own books lightly, very lightly, and while I can be fussy about the condition of a book when I buy it, some of my most treasured volumes are those that bear the marks of those who enjoyed them before they came into my custody. In between visitors yesterday, I perused the contents of Heather's display, the diversity of which is truly remarkable and utterly fascinating. The most surprising thing she's found, perhaps, is a condom that was mercifully still in its wrapper. I was surprised that someone would discard an autographed photo of the Leave It to Beaver cast, and I wonder if it was retroactive fan regret or carelessness that led to its being discarded. And the babies, all those baby pictures. Is anyone really so cynical as to believe that every baby looks the same? In Heather's own article about this collection, which was published in a community newspaper, she wrote, "Oh, Grandma, how could you leave these behind?" The editor removed that particularly compelling line, but the question remains, Grandma, Grandpa, what were you thinking? Old tickets to shows are easier to understand, since that kind of memorabilia is usually more precious to the nostalgic person who presented the ticket to gain admittance than it might be to others, unless it's from Woodstock. Far less surprising, but more charming, are the leaves and flowers and butterflies that have been preserved behind the pages. Commonplace things that have been saved, perhaps because they were especially elegant specimens, brightly colored or perfectly shaped. Books have long been used for safekeeping. The most obvious illustration can be found in the old family Bibles that were used to preserve life's passages, births and baptisms, weddings and deaths, many of which have been sadly discarded by families along with generations of family history, perhaps because they were allergic to the text that was safely guarding their family's story. But any book will suffice for protecting a cherished photograph or drawing a cherished photograph or drawing from being damaged, or keeping money out of the hands of a burglar, or holding one's Canada savings bonds, remember those, until they are redeemed at maturity. Books have also been used to hide things from the view of others. Love letters that need to be concealed, poor report cards from school, nude photographs before the digital era, cigarette wrappers from when you didn't want your parents to know you rolled your own, or that what you were smoking wasn't sold in stores, or the note reading, "Bless you, Mommy, bless you, Daddy," only the word wasn't bless, and it began with an F. True story. The utility of using books for both safekeeping and concealment led to a small industry of hollowed out books that weren't really books at all. There was no real content inside. They were simply a clever means of storing things away from prying eyes or grasping hands. Do you really think most people could be bothered to bind their copies of Reader's Digest in leather? Or have that many oversized dictionaries? No, they keep their watches and jewelry and spare car keys inside of these false covers. Although my wife Cindy does not share my enthusiasm for the large library that helps insulate the walls of our home from the cold and heat outdoors, keeping her more comfortable than she could possibly be. More than 7,000 volumes at last count. She is in fact a remorseless enabler of my penchant for collecting books. I could not pursue this habit on my own. And complain as she may, insisting that I must thin out my library or she will cremate my remains upon it in the backyard when the time comes, something I'm pretty sure Jim Gardner and his colleagues will not allow. She has, in fact, contributed several volumes to it, dozens, maybe even 3 digits worth. She's purchased these in Goodwill stores, secondhand shops, and yes, the Children's Hospital book market. And she has brought home some real gems, autographed books, Colin Powell, Garrison Keillor, rare books, and long out-of-print books. Once, she brought home the missing volume of a 6-volume series, in Icelandic no less, a language she does not read, of which I already possessed the other 5. Having paid $2 to complete a set that had already burned a $200 hole in my pocket. And by $200, I mean the amount that I was willing to confess to her. One volume she brought home on German history, as I recall, contained a lucrative bonus, a Christmas card signed Oma and Opa with a 100 euro note inside the envelope, which, given the book's pristine condition, had been discarded by a grandchild with no interest in German history, not even enough curiosity to open the book and discover an envelope inside. In the used books I've acquired over the years, I've found a razor blade and a syringe, more than one love poem, and a few unpaid utility bills, postcards and course syllabi, old currency, and a stock certificate for a bankrupt gold mining company, a variety of pressed plants, and the occasional bug. If they were butterflies, they somehow lost their wings along the journey. I've also discovered remnants of old assorted foodstuffs and several rings, all of them coffee rings, although one was probably a Coke stain. A few years ago, I acquired a 1912 volume about a famous legal case in Iceland that led to the country's last execution and in recent years inspired Hannah Kent's best-selling novel Burial Rites, which I would commend to you if you haven't read it. I wanted to know more about the facts of the case, and I asked my used book dealer in Iceland, yes, I have my own dealer, to find a copy of it. He searched high and low before securing a copy, but he warned me that it was marked. That was fine. If that was the best he could do, well, such is the case. When I opened the book, I found it filled with marginal notations, corrections of mistaken information in the text, additions of new information, and an assortment of newspaper clippings, pictures, and reference notes tucked between the pages. It was a gold mine for a researcher. A diplomat I know has an immaculate leather-bound edition of this book, but I'm convinced that my tattered, marked-up copy is far more valuable. Another book I picked up from New York City, The Standardization of Error, by the famous Manitoba-born Arctic explorer Vilhjalmur Stefansson, is equally valuable for its marginalia. Inscribed by its author to a professor who wanted to include one of its chapters in an anthology that he was working on, Vilhjalmur handwrote several corrections in the pages of the book, which makes it a unique treasure. By the way, before he switched to anthropology, Vilhjalmur had been studying theology at Harvard Divinity School with the expectation that he would come to Winnipeg as the minister of this congregation. And this book is the only volume of philosophy that he ever wrote. And there are several volumes I inherited from Philip Peterson, who served this congregation as its minister for 35 years before being elected to the provincial legislature. They are full of marginalia and memorabilia, not to mention the occasional limerick. There was an old windbag from Boston, started one. And these things help me to understand Phil better and this congregation's history, to understand it more deeply than I could have if he had not interacted with his books and saved some of his treasures between the pages. In some instances, his marginalia is as revealing as his sermons. For many people, their notes in the margins of books that they loved or loathed are the most substantial written legacy they will leave behind, telling us as much as their obituaries or even the stories about them that slowly fade from memory if no one thinks to write them down. I have gone from being a person who sought to keep his books in pristine condition to being someone who scribbles all over them. I've become aware that no collection, no archive, no university library, no public library will want my books when I'm gone. But perhaps those who loved me will be interested in what I had to say to the authors of those books in the pages of those volumes, the responses I wrote down, my interactions, how the book affected me. After my father died, when he was 54 and I was 18, he too young to die, and me too young to lose him, I was overwhelmed by sadness for what seemed like an eternity. As the months passed, I immersed myself in Dad's own substantial library. My habit is inherited. Thumbing through the pages of the books he had read, looking especially for the marginalia to be found or the occasional note serving as a bookmark. which helped to illumine my understanding of him, offering insights into his character while kindling many warm memories. Sometimes I found myself surprised, but mostly my discoveries confirmed my estimate of a man I knew rather well, but not nearly long enough. Lost in the pages of his books, he lingered with me. Perhaps this is one of the ghost stories I could have used to regale visitors to the church yesterday. The lingering presence of a man who had touched my life so deeply, who continued to teach me and influence me through his carefully collected library and the notes he left behind in the margins. In a volume of poetry, he'd underlined a passage by Christina Rossetti. Remember me when I have gone away, gone far away into the silent land. It was 8 years before his grave was marked, when Cindy spent the top-up pay she received from her employer after returning from maternity leave to buy a stone. And naturally enough, the epitaph reads, "Remember me when I am gone away, gone far away into the silent land." You never know when the words you've highlighted in a book, or perhaps even scribbled yourself, will find themselves carved in stone. So mark your books carefully, since they may become instructions to your heirs. Marginalia is not marginal. It reflects an inner conversation between authors and their readers, sometimes an engagement between the past and the present moment, sometimes a clash of ideas, and other times a grand harmony when a reader says yes to an author. At times, what we read in the margins or tucked away between the pages represents an expansion of knowledge, a growing awareness, the meeting and blending and blossoming of ideas. It reveals something about a living person who once held the book in their hands. On the surface, Heather Emberley's exhibition is about ephemera found in books as they pass from one owner to another. But deeper down, it honors the people who found meaning in those volumes, who saved their artifacts between the pages, and who committed their inmost thoughts to the margins. Please join together in hymn number 318, "We Would Be One."